Imagine being trapped, alone, in a cold, sterile space station. The overhead lights flicker, casting long, shifting shadows. The distant hum of machinery is punctuated by the soft hiss of pressurized air escaping through unseen vents. Then, footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, echoing through the corridors. The cold metal trembles beneath your feet. The air turns frigid. Silence presses in, until it's broken by something moving. Something relentless, unstoppable. And worst of all, it wears your face. This is the nightmare of Metroid Fusion. On the surface, it's a sci-fi action game, but beneath that, it's something far more terrifying. A story of isolation, identity loss, and the fear of being hunted. Samus Aran, a proud bounty hunter, is no longer herself. Infected, changed, and stripped of her power, she is pursued by a perfect copy. A manifestation of pure evil created by the X-Parasite. An entity that mimics Samus at full strength but missing one key aspect that Samus has. Humanity. Of course, Metroid has always had horror elements. The unsettling atmosphere, the grotesque mutations of Ridley, and the eerie pulsating Metroid hatchlings all contribute to the underlying sense of dread. And then there are moments that are outright disturbing, like the horrifying death of Crocomire in Super Metroid, where his flesh melts off his bones as he screams in agony, his skeleton being a reminder of the terror the player just witnessed. Those moments remind us that Metroid is more than just an action platformer. It's always flirted with horror. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that he does not become a monster, and if you gaze long enough into the abyss also gazes into you. Friedrich Nietzsche. This quote by Nietzsche speaks to the essence of Metroid Fusion's psychological horror. Samus, who once fought against monstrous creatures, is now faced to confront a monstrous version of herself, the SAX. This isn't just a creature she is fighting, it's a twisted reflection of who she used to be, a reminder of what she lost. As Samus gazes into the abyss of her own identity, she becomes what she once fought against. The horror of Metroid Fusion isn't just about being hunted. It's about the loss of self. Samus faces the terrifying question of whether she is still the hunter, or if she is slowly becoming the very thing she's always destroyed. The funny thing is, Metroid Fusion is rated E for everyone by the ESRB, just like Ocarina of Time, with its frightening overtones, Redeads, Shadow Temple, and the infamous Dead Hand. Metroid Fusion's horror elements don't quite fit the rating. The ESRB is just a guide, but it can be misleading, especially when it comes to games like this, where fear isn't measured by gore, but by the existential dread and psychological torment. The horrors of Metroid Fusion aren't in the blood and guts, it's in the fear of becoming something monstrous and losing your identity along the way. So have you ever played a game that left you haunted long after you finished it? One that made you question not just what's lurking in the shadows, but who you are? Let me know in the comments. And now let's step into the darkness and cover Metroid Fusion's deepest fears. The themes of Metroid Fusion: isolation, identity, and fear. After the haunting intro, we dive deeper into Metroid Fusion and what makes it a unique horror experience. This game isn't just about surviving against creatures and obstacles, it's about confronting fears on a deep psychological level. The main themes of Metroid Fusion are isolation, identity loss, and the fear of becoming the very thing you hunt. These aren't just abstract concepts, they are woven into the fabric of the story and gameplay. You're not just hunting down enemies in this game, you're trying to piece together who you are and what you've become, and whether you can escape the very thing you fear the most, your own transformation. This is where the horror begins. The fear of being hunted. The most chilling aspect of Metroid Fusion is the constant threat of the SAX. In previous Metroid games, Samus was always the hunter. She was always the one in control, wielding an arsenal of powerful weapons, navigating through hostile environments, and overcoming monstrous creatures. But in Fusion, the tables have turned. Samus is no longer the confident, powerful hunter we've come to know. She's the prey. The SAX is a terrifying reflection of Samus herself, a dark mirror image that pursues her relentlessly. It's stronger, faster, and more deadly than anything she's faced at that time. The idea of being hunted by something that is you, something that shares your memories, abilities, and even your DNA is horrifying. You can't escape it, and every encounter feels like a death sentence. You're no longer just fighting for survival, you're fighting against the very essence of who you are, and that is terrifying. One of the key elements that amplifies the horror of Metroid Fusion is Samus' vulnerability. This isn't the Samus we've seen before, taking on massive bosses with confidence and sheer power. After being infected with the X-Parasite, she lost much of her power. She's weaker, more fragile, and at the mercies of the dangers around her. Being saved from the jaws of death in the introduction left her with a glaring crutch. Whilst being saved by the very thing she sought to destroy for years, the Metroid, she gained their weakness to cold as well, which SAX uses against her in their encounters via Ice Beam. Her vulnerability makes her an unreliable hero. There's no guarantee she'll make it out this alive. The player too feels this vulnerability. Gone are the power-ups that gave Samus an edge. The atmosphere, paired with the limited weapons and abilities, also adds to the claustrophobic and unnerving tension. With every step, you feel the weight of being hunted. You're not just battling enemies. You're struggling to reclaim your lost self, all the while trying to stay ahead of the ever-present threat of SAX, the station and the horror atmosphere. But it's not just the enemies that create the horror, it's the environment itself. The BSL Station is designed to make you feel isolated, trapped, and completely alone. The sterile, lifeless halls stretch out endlessly, a labyrinth of cold metal and flickering lights. The only sounds are the hum of machinery and the constant hiss of a vent releasing pressure. It's a place devoid of warmth and humanity, and this dark setting only adds to the fear. The sound design is another critical aspect of the atmosphere. The soundtrack in Metroid Fusion is subdued, eerie, and unsettling. The sounds you hear, like the eerie hums, the soft drips of water, and the distant echoes, are purposely designed to make you feel uncomfortable. This isn't the typical Metroid experience where you're in your alien worlds in their environments. This is a sterile, claustrophobic station that has become a prison. But perhaps the scariest part of all of this is how Samus' sense of control is stripped away. She's locked in a station where not only the enemies in the environment are against her, but the looming shadow of the Federation is guiding her for their own agenda. As the story progresses, we learn that the Federation isn't as benevolent as Samus once thought. Samus in the past has always had reservations against higher authorities, but in this game it comes full circle that they are manipulating her, using her to do their dirty work, and keeping secrets from her that could go against their plan. This becomes evident when they purposely withhold key power-ups from her under the fear of her becoming too powerful in this mission. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the real monsters aren't the ones you fight in the dark, but the ones pulling the strings in the shadows. The Federation's dark secrets. As Samus uncovers more of the truth, we are introduced to the darker side of the Federation's operations. Initially, they appear as allies, guiding Samus and providing support, but as the game progresses, we learn that their true intentions are far more sinister. The Federation's involvement with the X-Parasite and their attempts to weaponize them are one of the core points that push the horror of Metroid Fusion even further. The deeper Samus digs, the more she uncovers about their manipulation and deceit. In the world of Metroid Fusion, the Federation represents the very corporate greed and corruption that often hides behind the facade of order and structure. The threat is no longer just the X-Parasite or the SAX, it's the Federation itself, and the knowledge that they're willing to sacrifice everything and everyone for their own gain. Samus is no longer just fighting to survive, she's fighting for the truth. She's battling against the institution that uses her as a tool, a weapon to further their own ends. This is a horrifying realization, especially when you realize Samus' battle is not just with the external threats, but with the very system that once supported her. The corruption within the Federation is a chilling commentary on power, control, and the cost of blind obedience. Samus Aran has faced countless horrors, space pirates, deadly parasites, planet-devouring threats, but Metroid Fusion forces her to confront something far more terrifying: herself. The SAS is not just an enemy, it is a shadow, a distorted reflection of who she was. It stalks her through the cold, sterile hallways and a reminder that she is no longer in control, that her body, her identity, is no longer her own. The horror of Fusion isn't about grotesque monsters or supernatural forces, it's the creeping dread of being hunted, being powerless, and losing control piece by piece. It's waking up to find that something inside of you has changed, and knowing that you may never be the same again. The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. H.P. Lovecraft. Metroid Fusion embodies this fear. The X-Parasite is an unknown force, one that not only consumes but replaces its host. Samus survives, but at a cost. She is no longer the same person she was before. The Federation becomes another looming shadow, proving that the greatest dangers don't always come from the monstrous creatures, but from those who seek to control them. But in the end, Samus does what she always does. She survives. She destroys the station, eliminating the X-Parasite threat, and defies the Federation's grasp. But as she drifts away in her ship, one question lingers. How much of herself did she leave behind in that station? This is the fear that Metroid Fusion leaves with us. Not the fears of the monsters in the dark, but the fear of transformation, of corruption, of losing control. And maybe, just maybe, the scariest thing of all is knowing that sometimes the greatest threat doesn't come from the outside. It comes from within. So what do you think? Metroid Fusion may not wear the mask of horror, but its terror lingers far beyond the final boss. So I ask you, what game has truly unsettled you long after the credits rolled? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget, the real horror isn't the monster you fight, it is the one staring back at you in the mirror.